America is not failing women incidentally. The structural exclusion of women from governance, leadership, and economic life is not a grievance sitting alongside the country's real problems. It's the mechanism producing the real problems. Every avoidable maternal death, every financial crisis hatched in a homogenous boardroom, every court ruling that bans nothing while making everything impossible. These are not system malfunctions. They are system outputs, and this country keeps choosing them. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, people. My name is Ryan Smith, and welcome to my publication, Uncomfortable. Today, we're going to have a long overdue conversation about women's role inside of the power structure of this country. Let's get into it. This Substack is reader supported. To receive new posts and support my work, please consider becoming a free or paid subscriber. And don't forget to like this post. It helps the algorithm get this out to more people. On May 1st, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals did not ban abortion. Let that be precise. No sweeping federal prohibition, no dramatic sequel to Dobbs. What the court did was quieter, and in many ways, more sophisticated. It ruled that mifepristone, the first drug in standard medication abortion regimen, can no longer be prescribed via telehealth or sent through the mail. The appeals court order immediately barred providers from virtually prescribing and mailing mifepristone, effectively restricting access across larger portions of the country and, most acutely, where clinic infrastructure is already sparse. Justice Samuel Alito issued a one-week administrative stay on May 4th, restoring access until May 11th, while the Supreme Court considers the emergency appeal. 1 week. Mark it. 2/3. That's the share of U.S. abortions that are medication abortions, from the Guttmacher Institute in 2022 study. By the first half of 2025, more than 1 in 4 abortions were provided via telehealth, up from fewer than 1 in 10 in 2022. So the court didn't ban abortion. It targeted the delivery mechanism used by the majority of people who get one, disproportionately in states where walking into a clinic is already functionally impossible. The ruling's language is procedural. The effect is not. The ban doesn't have to exist. Impossibility is sufficient. This is a pattern. It runs deeper than abortion. Learn to recognize it. No one officially banned women from the boardroom. They just built performance evaluation criteria that reward traits statistically distributed towards men, staffed the evaluation panels with men, and called the result meritocracy. No one officially structured American maternal health care to fail. They just defunded midwifery infrastructure, consolidated rural hospitals into extinction, and attached no meaningful political consequence to the United States ranking worse than nearly every comparable wealthy nation on maternal mortality. No one officially excluded women from power. Congress just keeps producing the same narrow demographic decade after decade and treating that as the neutral baseline. The obstruction doesn't announce itself. That's what makes it durable. You didn't have to ban what you can make impossible. You don't have to formally exclude people if the architecture of access does it for you. The country's America romanticizes. When Americans describe the society they wish they lived in, functional healthcare, high trust in institutions, excellent public education, residents who are measurably happy, they are almost always describing Nordic countries, Finland, Iceland, New Zealand. These nations dominate global quality of life rankings with almost embarrassing consistency. They also rank among the highest in the world for female political representation. That's right. Obviously, no nation succeeds because of a single variable. Nordic outcomes are shaped by institutional trust built over generations, favorable geography, resource wealth, relatively high social cohesion, and historical development trajectories that differ meaningfully from the American context. All right, so those distinctions are real, and they're worth acknowledging, for sure. But the argument that female representation is therefore irrelevant to governance quality becomes increasingly difficult to sustain when the correlation appears this consistently across this many instances, across this many countries. At some point, deliberately excluding a variable from analysis becomes its own methodological choice, and it's worth asking who that choice serves. You know, the narrative that Nordic success is about cultural homogeny, not governance, therefore it wouldn't translate here, that's not reality. Reality is that Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Iceland have all diversified significantly over the past 3 decades. Their governance outcomes have held. The variable that persists isn't ethnicity, it's institutional design, including who makes decisions. What woman-led governance actually produces female political representation that correlates with measurable improvements in education, healthcare access, family policy, anti-corruption outcomes, and social trust. These are not soft metrics, people. A nation's capacity to educate its children, care for its sick, and maintain institutions people actually believe in is the foundation of everything that follows. The countries treating that foundation as a priority and electing leaders statistically most likely to invest in it are winning by nearly every measure that matters. To be precise, no nation succeeds because of a single variable, and female representation alone does not guarantee competent governance. That's not my claim here. My claim is that persistently high-performing societies repeatedly converge around the same structural features, which are broader representation, stronger social infrastructure investment, less concentrated leadership cultures. The argument is not that women are inherently wiser or morally superior to men. It's that systems selecting from a broader range of perspectives, incentives, and leadership styles tend to produce more resilient outcomes over time. The distinction matters. This is a structural argument. It's not a biological one. The United States treats childcare, education funding, and family leave as woman issues. Countries that lead the world treat them as economic infrastructure. The difference in framing is the difference in outcomes. And the counterargument, correlation isn't causation, female representation might be a symptom of already healthy societies, not a driver of them, that argument proves too much. By the same logic, we should stop investing in anything that accompanies prosperity rather than precedes it. More critically, longitudinal research shows tracking outcomes before and after increases in female representation in specific institutions shows directional movement toward improved governance. The causal arrow isn't speculation, it's been studied. This isn't just correlation. Objection is most often deployed not as methodological rigor, but as a reason to stop asking the question. The boardroom, the crash, and the echo chamber. Research consistently shows that companies with more women in executive leadership exhibit lower risk exposure, stronger governance practices, more durable long-term performance. This is not soft finding. It appears in corporate governance literature, investor analysis, and institutional research across sectors and decades. Consider the 2008 financial collapse. The crisis emerged from a specific institutional culture, not simply a male one, a homogenous one. It was a culture built around leverage, normalization, short-term bonus incentive structures that rewarded risk-taking over durability, consensus pressure that treated internal dissent as disloyalty, and a personal architecture so uniform in background, temperament, and social origin that catastrophic blind spots went unnamed until they became catastrophic losses. The dominant personality type in the room was also the only personality type in the room. That's not a gender story, it's a monoculture story. The gender composition was simply one of several dimensions along which those institutions failed to diversify. And diversification across those dimensions is exactly what the research on reduced institutional risk-taking recommends. Iceland, which experienced one of the sharpest banking collapses globally, was explicit about the lesson. It restructured institutional leadership immediately. The country named what it observed publicly. America processed 2008 as a regulatory problem, passed Dodd-Frank, and left the personnel architecture of its financial institutions functionally unchanged. $22 trillion is the estimated cost of the 2008 financial crisis to the U.S. economy. It's more than half of our current national debt. The leadership profile of the institutions that produced it was not treated as a variable worth examining in the post-crisis regulatory response. And when people say that there have been female executives who made catastrophic decisions too, this isn't about gender. That's correct. No serious version of this argument claims otherwise. The claim is statistical and structural. It's not individual. Homogeneous leadership of any composition amplifies groupthink. Systems select for a narrow range of personality traits, risk tolerances, and social backgrounds that produce predictable failure modes. The 2008 crisis was one of them. The argument isn't that women are infallible, it's that monocultures are fragile. America has spent decades defending one. The talent bottleneck America calls normal. Women now earn more college degrees in the United States than men. By any credential-based measure of the term, women are outperforming. And yet leadership pipelines in finance, government, law, technology, and media still skew heavily male. The gap between credential attainment and power attainment is not closing at any pace that suggests organic correction. Higher female workforce participation correlates with GDP growth, innovation, and productivity. And this is not contested economics. These are facts. It's the working assumption of the IMF, the World Bank, and most serious development economists. America leaves enormous talent on the table, constructs structural barriers to stop it from rising, and then describes the resulting leadership class as the output of a meritocracy. That requires a specific kind of audacity to say with a straight face. Now let's talk about the invisible tax. The standard rebuttal to the talent bottleneck argument is that women make different choices. They prioritize family. They opt out of high-pressure tracks. The gap is a preference, not a barrier. This is the freely chosen defense. And it does enormous structural work while asking you to ignore the structure entirely. Hear me out. American women perform significantly more unpaid labor than men. Childcare, elder care, household management, the invisible administrative load of keeping a family functional. The labor is real, economically valuable by any serious accounting, and almost entirely absent from GDP calculations. It directly competes with the time, energy, and career continuity required to build institutional power. The United States offers no federally mandated paid family leave. It has among the most expensive childcare costs of any wealthy nation relative to median income. It provides no structural support for the caregiving burden. Then it treats the career interruptions that burden produces as evidence of lower ambition or commitment. The motherhood penalty is documented across wages, promotion rates, and hiring decisions. The fatherhood bonus, the measurable increase in perceived competence and compensation men often receive after having children, is equally documented. These are not cultural attitudes operating at the margins. They are embedded in compensation structures and institutional evaluation practices. The system levies a tax on the people doing the caregiving work the economy depends on to exist. Then it points to the resulting wealth gap as proof of where the talent really is. The narrative will have you believe women who leave high-powered careers are making a free choice about their priorities. But the reality, a choice architecture where one option costs nothing and the other costs your career, your income continuity, and your institutional standing, that's not neutral. Calling the outcome a preference is a way of describing a constrained decision as if the constraints don't exist. Let's talk about how America governs versus how it could govern. Research suggests female legislatures are statistically more likely to compromise across party lines, pass legislation, prioritize constituency services over ideological performance. This is not a moral claim. It's a structural observation about what the current incentive architecture of American politics selects for and what it selects against. It is also worth being precise about what this argument is not. Again, it's not a claim that female leadership is inherently virtuous or that male leadership is inherently destructive. Angela Merkel governed Germany through the Eurozone crisis, the refugee crisis, and a decade of global instability, with the pragmatism and institutional steadiness that earned respect across ideological lines. Jacinda Ardern's management of the Christchurch shooting and the COVID pandemic drew international attention for the same reasons. But so did the male architects of Nordic social democracy, the coalition builders, the infrastructure investors, the leaders who constructed the institutions those countries still benefit from. Clement Attlee built Britain's National Health Service in 1948 from a war-depleted economy, not because he was female, but because he governed from a set of priorities centered on long-term national resilience rather than short-term political dominance. The argument is not biological, it's architectural. What these leaders share across gender is not chromosomes. It's a governing orientation that treated institutional investment as the job, not the cost of doing the job. Diverse leadership amplifies that orientation. Monocultures suppress it. Congress increasingly operates as an arena for personal brand building and partisan theater. It's like the green room for people that run for president, if I'm being honest. And collaboration is framed as weakness. Compromise is framed as betrayal. The politicians most rewarded by the current media economy are often least interested in governing. That is a design choice, and it selects against the governing style research most consistently associates with gender diverse leadership. Pragmatism over performance, function over dominance, outcomes over optics. America has built a system that rewards the wrong things, and then call the results leadership, where the abstraction ends. The United States spends more per capita on healthcare than any nation on earth. Its maternal mortality outcomes would embarrass a middle-income country. Black women in America die in childbirth at rates that are not explained by poverty or access alone. They're the product of a healthcare system that has structurally devalued the lives and medical testimony of women, and particularly women of color, across decades of policy decisions made in rooms where those women were underrepresented. That's not healthcare anomaly. It's what it looks like when a country makes decisions about women's bodies in rooms where women are not there, or at least underrepresented, where the political cost of failure is low, and where the people most directly affected have the least structural power to impose accountability. This mifepristone ruling is not an outlier. It is the method expressed clearly. What homogenous systems keep producing. Historically, male-dominated power structures have repeatedly rewarded performative dominance, competitive escalation, and short-term victory signaling over long-term institutional resilience, which is what this country needs. That pattern shows up in foreign policy decisions that prioritize displays of strength over diplomatic resolution. It shows up in financial regulatory cultures that treated risk management as a constraint on performance rather than a component of it. It shows up in corporate governance structures where dissenting voices, regardless of who raised them, were filtered out before they could interrupt the consensus. This is not a claim about what men are. It is a claim about what certain systems select for when they remain uncontested long enough to define normal. Any sufficiently homogeneous leadership culture develops blind spots it can no longer see because everyone in the room shares them. The question isn't whether that produces failures, because it does, reliably, across sectors and centuries. The question is whether the United States is willing to treat that as a design problem rather than an unchangeable feature of how power works. Bottom line here, the Fifth Circuit didn't ban abortion on May 1st. It targeted access mechanisms, quietly, procedurally, in a way that requires you to understand how telehealth prescribing works and what share of abortions are medication abortions before you can see what was actually done. That's the sophistication of the method. It doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to work. The same architecture operates everywhere women's structural power is being contained without being formally prohibited. No one bans competence from rising. They just make sure the pipeline never quite reaches the top. No one officially levies a tax on caregiving. They just build an economy that treats it as invisible, prices it out of reach, provides no policy support for it, and then counts the resulting career gaps as evidence of where the ambition really was. No one officially keeps homogenous leadership in place. The incentive structures do it. The evaluation criteria do it. The social cost of challenging the culture does it. All quietly, all with plausible deniability, all producing the same outcome decade after decade. The strongest version of this argument is not that women will save America. It's that homogenous systems become fragile systems, and America has spent decades perfecting its monoculture while watching the countries it claims to admire do something structurally different. Those countries invested in the infrastructure that produces resilient, high-trust societies. They diversified who makes the decisions. They built incentive architectures that reward sustainability over dominance and governance over theater. America looks at those outcomes, calls them admirable, and then returns to choosing this instead. But it's worth being precise about who America is in that sentence. The choice is not simply voters failing to notice. It's incumbency systems that make displacing existing power structures prohibitively expensive. It's a donor architecture that concentrate political investment in candidates who protect existing economic arrangements. It's media incentive structures that reward conflict performance over governance competence. It's cultural evaluation frameworks that have coded authority as male for long enough that deviation from that template still reads as risk. These are not accidents of preference. They are institutional self-reproduction mechanisms. The system is not failing to correct. It's working exactly as the people who benefit from it designed it to work. That's not an accident. That's a wound. And the most precise description of this, America is not being held back by its enemies. It's being held back by a structural choice it keeps making through its institutions, its incentives, its architecture, and its definitions of normal, about who is actually allowed to govern it. I'm Ryan Smith, and if this made you uncomfortable, good. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share this. Make sure you like and comment. I'm building something real. Who wants to join me? Everything they told you is wrong. I'm here to set it straight.
This is the uncomfortable truth.